October 1992. A young man is discovered brutally murdered in his home in Muscatine, Iowa.
He has injuries to his back, obvious bloody injury to the back of his head.
This was an up-close and personal, very violent, very angry attack.
The victim was a young and popular bartender, and his promiscuous lifestyle is creating challenges for investigators.
He was involved in drugs. He was involved with a lot of different women. And some of these women even knew about each other, but some of them didn't.
Police identify a suspect, but without enough evidence cannot make an arrest, and the case goes cold.
I think she hoped she would never get caught, but I think anybody that gets away with murder is always nervous that they're going to get caught someday.
This is the story of Corey Wieneke's ferocious murder, a crime unsolved for 25 years until a chance encounter brings his killer to justice. October 13th, 1992. The West Liberty Police Department receives a 911 call from a woman. She is hysterical.
West Liberty Police. Hi, I need somebody to come out to my house. I think my fiance is dead. He's all bloody and he's not breathing and he's cold. Oh my God!
The call came into the sheriff's office, was in the afternoon hours. Female by the name of Jody Hotz had called in, was hysterical, called into our dispatcher, said she had returned home and found her fiance was deceased.
The first people that responded to the scene were the local municipal police out of West Liberty, and they'd also dispatched fire ambulance over to the residence.
He's on the side of the bed. There's a lot of blood around it. It looks like he's been beat pretty bad. Is he dead? Yeah, pretty much. He's cold and he's stiff. Who is it? It's Corey Wieneke.
The scene is immediately cordoned off until the investigation team and forensics arrive.
The very first thing that I did was make sure that we had that scene taped off and secured, that no one was going in or out from the scene, to preserve the evidence that was at the scene, as well as any evidence that would be in the yard or the driveway area. It was immediately evident to me that this was a blunt force trauma death.
He has injuries to his back, obvious bloody injury to the back of his head. There's quite a bit of blood on the bed, blood spattered on the wall, on the side of the bed, and of course on the floor where he had been laying.
From the evidence at the crime scene, investigators start to understand how the murder unfolded.
A crime of this nature typically is a very personal thing. It wasn't, somebody walked in and shot him and turned around and left. This was an up-close and personal, very violent, very angry attack.
Officers start processing the scene and collecting evidence.
Law enforcement, of course, photographed the scene, took an inventory of what was in the bedroom and elsewhere in the house. They were looking for what would have been our murder weapon. They were pretty clearly looking for some sort of long, blunt object like a bat.
The scene yielded very little helpful evidence. There was no fingerprints. I don't think they located footprints. They looked for tire impressions. I don't think they found any of that.
The officers that were on scene that afternoon through the night into the next day had blocked off the portion of gravel road where this residence was at. One of the news crews that had come out the afternoon of the homicide camped out in their vehicle. So in the morning, one of the news crew decided to walk up to the residence. During his walk up there, he located a bat laying on the side of the road. That was ultimately identified as the murder weapon.
Police appeal for information and start canvassing the area.
So there was a local farmer in the area. He had traveled down that road going towards West Liberty at about 9 o'clock in the morning and didn't see any bat on the roadway. He did tell us that when he went back down the road at about 1 p.m. that he noted that there was a bat that was present by the side of the road.
Based on the fact that he sees the bat on the road later in the day, but knows that it's not there earlier in the day, we were able to establish that the murder would have happened somewhere between 10 a.m. and about 1 to 1:30 p.m. that day.
The victim, 22-year-old Corey Wieneke, is well known in the small community.
Corey went to school in West Liberty, played football in high school, got out of high school, and did what every late teen, early 20-year-old does. Kind of led that party lifestyle.
He worked at Wink's Bar. It was essentially the family-run business in West Liberty. Corey was a young man and enjoyed being in the bar. He enjoyed the bar environment. He enjoyed drinking in the bar and socializing with people.
He was a likable type of guy. I think people knew him, he knew them. It was a bar where he called you by your name, he knew your name, and everyone knew him. I think he was a friendly person. I think that he did a lot of things that young people did at the time. He played on softball team. Pretty normal kid.
Corey also has a reputation as a party boy, and despite being engaged to Jody Holtz, has a playboy image too.
A lot of the stuff that I read from the initial interview indicated that he was involved in drugs. He was involved with a lot of different women, and some of these women even knew about each other, but some of them didn't. He was a pretty free spirit, the way I got it.
Corey and Jody were kind of like high school sweethearts that had been engaged, and they were planning on getting married. They shared a small home in West Liberty and were kind of moving forward into those next phases of their relationship, planning on getting married and things like that.
Jody thought that Corey was going to turn things around, and maybe marriage would have helped him. Maybe marriage would have slowed him down.
Unfortunately for detectives, the forensic evidence from the crime scene yields no leads.
Well, it was 1992, and forensic science not even close to being what it is today. So we were fairly limited in what we could do forensically at that point in time. The bat was collected by the State Police Crime Lab. It was taken there for testing.
They used an investigative technique which would still be in use today, and that is put the bat in a chamber and fill it with superglue fumes. The superglue will stick to everything on the bat, and in the process it sticks to the fingerprint. As it turned out, there were not any usable fingerprints recovered on the bat.
The extent of the expertise of their blood testing at that point in time was they could determine a blood type. So they determined that the blood type that was present on the bat would have belonged to the victim, Corey.
Corey's Casanova lifestyle is adding a layer of complexity to the investigation.
To commit a blunt force trauma killing, someone's obviously very, very upset with that individual. So we knew that there had been some type of event that probably happened very recently that led up to what happened here. So that's what we began to dig for also.
You have to start with a small circle around the victim. So you usually start with the spouse or boyfriend, girlfriend, whoever it is, and then you work out. With Corey, it was a little bit more difficult because he had more than one relationship going on. Some of these women that he was having sex with had boyfriends, had husbands. That made it a bit harder than normal. Corey was a strong young man, and for that type of crime to have committed, I think it had a lot of people scratching their heads asking, for one, who could have done this? And for two, how could they have pulled it off? Because it did not appear that Corey had fought back.
October 1992. The West Liberty Police Department in Iowa is investigating the murder of 22-year-old Corey Wieneke, who was beaten to death with a blunt object inside his home.
You were dealing with someone that had contact with thousands of people per week. And so early on, the talk was this in connection with some type of sexual relationship? Was this in connection with illegal drugs? Was this in connection with gambling? Was this in connection with an altercation that had possibly taken place at the bar and someone was upset? So there was a lot of different facets and a lot of different angles to look at, and we ended up talking to a tremendous number of people.
Corey's fiancée, Jody Holtz, is ruled out as a suspect when colleagues confirm she was at work all day. But through interviews with Corey's friends and colleagues, detectives quickly develop a person of interest, Annette Hazen.
She would have been talked to because of the fact that she was a bar patron. She would have been talked to because of the fact that she was a bar employee. And she would have been talked to because of the fact that very early on we learned that she had had a sexual relationship with Corey. And we didn't have to search her out at that point because she showed up at the police station.
Annette shows up with her sister-in-law, Jackie Hazen, at the police department and volunteers that she had seen Corey at the bar the night before. She actually puts herself at the house, at the farmhouse, later that morning, saying that they stopped, she and Jackie stopped on the way to Iowa City while they were running errands, but claims that she has no knowledge of what would have happened.
It did seem a little strange that she come up with all this stuff and that she wanted to present it willingly. But then I also kind of got the feeling that she was doing that because she was afraid. She really didn't want to sit down in front of cops. She didn't really want, she was afraid of something, them finding something out.
Police begin to reconstruct events on the night leading up to Corey's murder.
From the interviews that were conducted, we learned that at bar closing time, the night before the homicide took place, that Annette had left the bar at a certain point in time prior to closing, that Annette was extremely intoxicated, that Annette was probably also using drugs that night.
Not only is Annette seeing her relationship with Corey slipping away, but that night she also comes across a love rival entering the bar.
By all witness statements, Corey basically was treating Annette very poorly, was basically trying to find a way to end their relationship. Then it got worse for Annette because Wendy shows up and Corey basically picks Wendy over Annette. So Annette gets so mad that instead of leaving the bar, she waits for Corey out in his car for when the bar closes.
Corey and this other female left the bar. Annette's still in the car. They are going to drive Annette home.
All three of them were traveling down the road to take Annette home. Annette wasn't happy about that. Annette didn't want Wendy to be in the car, so Annette tried to jump out of the car as it was traveling down the roadway. And Corey and Annette had exited the vehicle and had an argument, a screaming match. And eventually Annette got back inside the vehicle and Corey took her home.
Corey then took this other woman home and then went back to Annette's house where they slept together, kind of made up after their fight, and then Corey left and presumably went back to his house.
If she loved Corey, she wants to fix it. She wants him to break it off with everyone else and be with Corey. She couldn't have expected too much. She had to know he was engaged. So what could she expect from a guy like that?
Detectives question Annette about her movements after she last saw Corey.
Annette's timeline that morning was very interesting and made little sense. She says she sleeps for a couple hours, and then gets woken up by her sister and it gets taken to go do a roofing job in a nearby town. She's never been a roofer before, never been a roofer since. She's ripping off shingles for about an hour and a half when her sister comes back and picks her up because her sister has to go to a doctor's appointment in Iowa City.
She also related to us that she was going to stop by Corey's residence on the way to Iowa City, and that she did that, and that she had knocked on the door and there was no answer at the door, that her and Jackie continued on to Iowa City, stopped at different various places, made some small purchases, and that she would have the receipts for those purchases.
In her interviews, she also says then later that day, after they finish their errands in Iowa City, they come back from Iowa City to West Liberty, drive past Corey's house on a parallel road about a mile away, don't stop, but then stop in town and call back to the house on a payphone to try to talk to him, but he doesn't answer. And then she says that they went home. That also doesn't make any sense.
Detectives start focusing on Annette Hazen as her testimony becomes increasingly suspicious.
There's always red flags, but the big giant red flags, the ones that are like on top of the building screaming at you that this is the person, is when your suspect starts coming forward providing alternate suspects. She started coming in and saying, well, Corey was being threatened by this guy, or Corey was being threatened by this guy. She starts providing all these different leads for police to follow up on, hoping to take them off her trail.
The next move for detectives is taking a closer look at Annette's relationship with co-worker and part-time lover, Corey Wieneke.
Annette meets Corey when he's a teenager working at the bar, and she's 7 years older. So she's in her early mid-20s and he is in his late teens. They, as far as we know, had a sexual relationship.
Annette was living day to day, going to work when you needed money, going out at night, partying, trying to still live that lifestyle that Corey's living.
She was unusually interested in the investigation. She would come to the police station of her own volition and check on things. She had made statements that had placed herself at the scene of the crime during the period of time that we knew the crime occurred. So she was being looked at hard, and eventually she was asked to take a polygraph test. They set up another date for her to come in, and she took the polygraph examination on that day and basically passed the polygraph. There was no conclusive evidence that they could say after she took that polygraph that would lead you to believe that she was guilty.
Unfortunately, when she took the polygraph and passed it, the law enforcement investigators, they worked other leads and went on to other things. The investigation just petered out at that point.
Over time, with no new leads to pursue, the case goes cold.
After the initial investigation of the case was not solved, no arrest had been made. It's an open homicide case, and it was routine for us to reopen these things and look at them.
They would get pulled out if new information came in. If things were quiet, we'd pull them out and look at them.
We interviewed some people, the DCI and I, that really didn't give us a whole lot. We were getting the same names, the same information, nothing that could link Corey to, drug use. Nothing came, back to us that someone was so jealous that they'd want to hurt him. And it just went cold.
The case remains cold for 25 years until detectives receive an unexpected and unrelated tip-off that potentially reignites the case.
Agent Valletta had gone to the University of Iowa hospitals and clinics on a completely different matter and was waiting to see the individual that he wanted to talk to. Happened to have a conversation with Jessie, who was working at the hospital, and she started to ask him questions about cold cases.
So Jessie Becker, she's a nurse there. She was the nurse in charge of the floor, and she came and kind of aggressively asked me what I was doing there and basically told me I needed to leave. That's when I told her I was with DCI and that I was there to interview the guy that had been stabbed.
Jessie, for whatever reason, at that moment decided to ask Trent if he knew anybody who worked on cold cases, old murders.
And I'm like, well, actually, I'm probably one of two in the state that actually does them. And she said, and I said, well, why is that? And she said, well, because I know who killed someone back in Muscatine County a few years ago. She told me that Annette Hazen had killed Corey Wieneke.
In 2017, 25 years after the unsolved murder of Corey Wieneke, detectives receive information that could finally reopen the case.
That encounter with Agent Villada and Jessie Becker was the catalyst that got this case going again.
It's a 1 in a million chance that he goes to this hospital, meets this person that tells him about this case that is more than 25 years old at that point in time, that he confirms that the crime took place and that all the details essentially match.
To set the scene, Jessie is, at the time of this murder, a 9-year-old girl living in West Liberty. She is friends with Jackie Hazen's daughter. So Jessie and her friend are sleeping over at Jackie Hazen's house, where Annette stays, where Annette lives also.
Jessie said they were staying upstairs. They were sneaking down the steps to go to the refrigerator to grab something. And she kind of smiled and said, I'm not sure what it was, if it was something we were supposed to have or weren't. But we're sneaking down the steps. And as we get to the bottom, Annette Hazen is at the table.
What Jessie sees is Annette has lit a number of black candles and is crying and talking to herself. What Jessie hears Annette say to herself, not knowing that these girls are there, Corey, I'm sorry I hurt you. Corey, I never meant to kill you. Corey, I love you.
She's scared. She goes back upstairs and tells the girls that she's with. Ultimately, that's discounted. She goes home and tells her mom what she saw. And that's where it stopped.
The mother was in a very complicated situation romantically, and had a fear that that there would be some retribution that would not be good, maybe for Jessie or maybe for herself, and chose not to say anything at that point.
With this new lead, officers reopen the case.
There's a lot of work to be done then. You can't just take a confession and charge someone with it. You have to corroborate facts within the confession. You have to, there has to be more. So what I did is I started a little background check on Jessie, and then I started reading the case file, the Corey Wieneke homicide case file.
One of the things that I thought was very important in hearing Jessie's story and realizing Jessie is what you would call a dream witness. Army Reserve, master's degree. She's in a position of enormous responsibility, but she's a 9-year-old girl when she hears and sees this. And so it was important to me to know, what do we have that we can do to corroborate her information? And so I asked the investigators, did she tell her mom? So they did some follow-up. They go interview Jessie's mom, and Jessie's mom corroborates everything. Jessie comes home from that sleepover and tells her mom what she saw. And it relates the same thing about the black candles and Annette's statement to her mom. So that was enormously important corroboration for us.
Investigators need to corroborate Jesse's story further if they want to use it as evidence.
I'm concerned because memories change over a long period of time. I didn't think that maybe she was being dishonest, but I was concerned that the memories from something that happened to you when you're 9 years old and now you're almost 40 or so, I had concerns about that. I would want something to corroborate what she remembered.
I think it would be hard to remember something like that so many years later. I don't doubt that it was a disturbing event that she saw. It would be hard to see an adult having very strong emotions like that and trying to make sense of that as a young person.
We wanted to verify that what Jessie said she saw, she had the ability to see. We had her draw the area, the vantage point from the steps into the dining room. So when I went to photograph the house, that area was photographed from different vantage points and verified that, yeah, she could see what she saw.
People often make a big deal about little kids and their memories. And I don't know if that's fair, because when something tragic happens to you, it gets burned into your mind. Jessie Becker never heard anybody else say that they killed someone before. I bet she relived that night over and over and over again. That's why her drawing was so good. That's why her recollection of everything that happened was so good.
At this stage, officers believe they have enough and bring their original suspect, Annette Hazen, now Annette Cahill, back in for questioning.
She came in, she played her part. She acted like a grandmother. She acted very concerned about resolving the case. She wanted to be helpful, but as with most criminal cases, she was only helpful up to the point where she started feeling like a suspect.
Off and on, back and forth.
Your relationship?
Yes.
Romantic, you're saying?
Yes.
Annette was cooperative / uncooperative. Yes, she could meet with them. Well, maybe not today, maybe a different day. Maybe I have something going on so I can meet with you for a very limited period of time. And when people start putting those type of roadblocks in your way, you know, they're trying to take control of the situation. And that's certainly what she was doing with them.
Once the time's up, she leaves and says she'll come back in and do another interview. Well, then she makes up just a crazy story that an old friend of hers from high school showed up and now she's got to go out for dinner. She can't meet us again. And then she leaves. She leaves the state for a couple weeks and doesn't come back. So her level of cooperation with us disappears within 40 minutes of the first interview.
I think one of the big things that came from those interviews that had never come up in any prior interviews was Annette told us that that was the first time that Corey told her that he loved her.
We argued, got back in the car, took that girl, whoever she was, she had a child by Corey, dropped her off somewhere, drove back to the farm, and we had sex that night. I think it was angry sex. And I don't even know if I've ever mentioned this before. That was the very first night Corey ever told me he loved me.
Why is this the first time we're hearing about this? Why didn't this come up in any of the other dozen interviews that were conducted over the years? That was a big thing for us.
She gave Corey an ultimatum, and he chose her. He chose her over Jody, and so she would have no reason whatsoever to kill him, because that was the first time Corey told her he loved her. So things could not be any better.
We had talked about skipping town, In fact, the following Monday, the week after he died, we were supposed to go to, or following Saturday, I'm sorry, we were supposed to go to Branson to look at bars for sale. I loved Corey dearly. I really, truly did. I didn't think it was going to last, to be perfectly honest. He was so much younger than me, and he slept with anything that walked through the door. It was not, he wasn't for one person.
In her mind, they were going to have this running away together scenario. You know, they were going to leave kind of the difficulties of life in West Liberty and the things that they were dealing with there, and they were going to start a new life together. And it sounded like a fantasy.
Those were not Corey's plans. And when we talked to other people, associates of Corey's, they would just kind of laugh about that, you know, because basically the only person in the world that believes that that scenario is going to take place is Annette.
I think that argument the night before, I think the dropping her off at home and leaving with this other woman pushed her over the edge.
They wondered what Corey could have done to piss somebody off so bad that they killed him. You don't do anything to deserve this. Go knock the out of somebody if you're that mad. You don't do this. Isn't that still mad?
She basically says, look, Corey deserved to get beat badly, but he didn't deserve to die. Now, you would have to ask yourself, why would someone who's being accused of beating someone to death say he deserved to be beaten? You know, he didn't deserve to die. It's almost, we call it a cold case confession, for lack of better terms, because she's admitting to exactly what she did without saying she did it.
Investigators receive a warrant for Annette's arrest.
I had walked up to the house, knocked on the door, was able to handcuff her without incident. Told her that she was under arrest and she was being charged with murder.
She was very stoic, just sat in the back and didn't say anything. You would hope that she'd be screaming in the back saying that we got the wrong person, but it seemed to us like she knew what was coming.
I thought it was a righteous charge and a worthy fight, and it was time to bring her to justice.
May 2018. The West Liberty Police Department in Iowa have just arrested Annette Cahill for the 1992 murder of her lover, Corey Wieneke.
I charged Annette with murder in the first degree, which is a Class A felony punishable by life without the possibility of parole. It includes with it lesser degrees of murder and manslaughter automatically in that charge. So it was the charge I thought was appropriate.
We're trying to solve a crime from the early 90s. Annette has aged. She had a career, she had a family, you know, by all rights had been leading a normal life. We're trying to go back and deal with 1992 Annette. So that was a hurdle that we had to cross.
We're talking about somebody who was an alcohol and drug-fueled, angry, uncontrolled individual in 1992, and by the time you go to trial, you have a mother and a grandmother sitting there.
One of the challenges of this prosecution, really in jury selection, was she does not look like a killer. She looks like a grandmother. 26 years have passed her by. She does not look like somebody who would come into a person's house with a bat and crush their skull. So the challenge of getting jurors to see the Annette that existed in 1992 was a big one.
The prosecution presented a very aggressive case about Annette being a very jealous and emotional and fiery individual who wanted Corey for herself and couldn't not only see him with someone else, but couldn't see him without her. When Jessie was describing that she had seen Annette with burning black candles and pacing the room and being very emotional and saying, "I'm sorry, Corey, I'm sorry I killed you," it seemed very high drama. I mean, black candles, kind of like, what are we talking about here? Are they kind of mystical in a way? Are they spiritual in a way? That was a very, very vivid detail. I could picture that in my head. I could picture that entire scene of what that looked like. And it seemed very dramatic.
The jury leave the courtroom to deliberate, but cannot reach a verdict.
The first trial ended in a mistrial. We were confident that we laid everything out the best we could. We were confident that we had the facts and we were going to get a verdict in our favor. Ultimately, at the end of the day, came back with a hung jury.
I was gutted. From our perspective, we've worked so hard to do the investigation, to build it all up. And then for me as a prosecutor, it is really a very hard thing to go through a trial of that length, of that intensity, and then it ends with a hung jury. And you find out that the jury really did not resonate to your case theory and wanted a lot more. That was a low moment.
Myself and the investigators that eventually solved this case at the end, we were all present when we got the verdict, the hung jury. Everyone gets up, leaves the room, and we're left standing. And everyone looked around and they said, "Let's get this stuff cleaned up and we'll meet in a half hour at the county attorney's office and talk about the next trial."
While investigators are searching for new evidence for the second trial, they learn of another witness, Scott Payne, who knew Annette at the time of Corey's murder.
He'd been heavily involved in alcohol abuse and drug abuse. He'd been interviewed early in the investigation, indicated that he wasn't cooperative with the police when they talked to him back in 1992 because he didn't like the police and he'd never be cooperative with the police.
Through happenstance, through Scott Payne's mother talking to Corey Wieneke's mother, we learned that Scott Payne was surprised that he had been not called to testify as a witness. I open up the report on my computer and I search for the name and I find him and I think, why would we have called this witness? Well, the investigators go out and interview him again, and we realize that now that he's sober, he's a much, much better witness and had some important information to give us.
So Scott Payne was a drug user at the time who was going out to Annette's house to use drugs with other men that would go there. One day that he was there, he thought it was around the time that Corey Wieneke dies. He sees Annette and Jackie pull up in Jackie's car with a bag of bloody clothes, which they begin to burn.
He said there was blood on it. At that point, he had worked at a meatpacking facility, so he knew what bloody clothes looked like.
Obviously, that shows her connection with this murder. It shows her guilty conscience, and was a very important piece of evidence that corroborated what Jesse Becker told us.
In September 2019, the second trial of Annette Cahill starts in the Muscatine County District Court.
Throughout the trial, she was very reserved, unemotional almost. There were a few times where you could tell that she was feeling something. So at some points, I saw her tear up a little bit, depending on what the testimony was. But for the most part, she was very reserved.
The testimony provided at trial was certainly damaging to Annette, but you're relying on memories from witnesses from 30 years ago or so. And had there been some evidence, like a fingerprint or DNA or something else that tied her to the crime, I would be all for it. But there was none of that ever presented or even discovered. I think based on what the jury had, I could see him going with second-degree murder. I think that's adequate for a person her age. That's pretty much a life sentence.
The jury was smart. They probably believed what I believed. They probably believed that Annette went over there with the intention to seriously assault Corey, and that led to his death, which is second-degree murder. So I think they took their time, they reviewed the evidence, and I think they got it correct.
I think there was a degree of relief once the trial was over, not only with the family, but the community as a whole. I've talked to a handful of people over the last couple of years since the trial's over and the sentencing is done, that they'll come up and say, yeah, we knew Annette did it.
The motive for this was jealousy and anger. Jealousy at Wendy replacing Annette. Anger that this trip to Branson, this new reality, was not going to happen. It's a classic and old motive for killing. I think it was premeditated in the sense that Annette went into that house intending to cause Corey Wieneke grave bodily harm.
It only takes one good hit to the head and you're defenseless. And Corey didn't fight back. He was still in his underwear.
She was a very jealous, angry individual that, ended up turning to violence to try and solve her problem, and it resulted in a homicide.
The West Liberty Police Department can now finally close the file on the 1992 murder.
Well, I call this situation a case of the investigators of old and the investigators of new. And certainly to me, the investigators of old are the people that caught this case in 1992, that worked it from its inception. I'm one of those individuals. When Agent Valletta and Sheriff Reese and other people became involved in the most recent aspect of this investigation, trust me, they're my heroes. They solved this case.
Sometimes it's nice to get lucky in a case. And we've never had a better witness than Jesse Becker, but it was complete luck that it happened. It wasn't great investigative work or new DNA findings. It was a bump in time where two people connected and she happened to talk to the right person.
We fight for the victims. That's what we do. It's painful to have something open as long as this was open. Here's how you carry around uncertainty in a small town. You know that every day when you walk down the sidewalk, that the person that you're meeting on the sidewalk might be the person that committed homicide on your son, because they don't know who it is. So I think it's a great, great relief when you hear that there's been an arrest in that case and that you don't have that feeling of uncertainty anymore. And hopefully you can move towards closure.
The answers are always there if we know where to look. The answers are always there, and the answers are, if you ask the right questions to the right person, and you can pick up on it and you can read it, the answer is always there. You may not always have the physical proof, but the answer will be there.